Hey, everybody, and welcome to the South Kitsap Chamber of Commerce candidate interviews for the 2022 general election. What I've done is I've taken 6 races between the 26th Legislative District and the 35th Legislative District. I'm taking the 12 candidates, 12 interviews, spliced them together to come up with 6 videos for those 6 races. I've asked all the candidates the same questions. We were fortunate enough this year to get all the candidates to participate. We've also included the Kitsap County Commissioners race, which is District 3. District 3 includes kind of north of South Kitsap, Bremerton, up into just a little bit north of Silverdale. So it's the central Seebeck area. Even though you don't live in that area, if you live in Kitsap County, you do get to vote in that race. So I would encourage you to check out that video also. And then lastly, a word on the video production itself. I am not a professional videographer, never claimed to be. So what I've done is I've taken the 14 videos, spliced them together. There may occasionally be an awkward silence. There may be some abrupt boom, next question, things like that. I've kind of cut out any small talk and courtesies that may have taken place throughout the course of the videos. So thanks for watching. I hope you learned a little bit of something here. If you did, make sure you tell your friends about it so that they can watch and make an informed decision. But again, I want to stress, most important, vote, get your ballot in by August 8th. I understand if you get your ballots in as soon as you get them, then there is less chance of getting political junk mail. So thanks for watching and have a great day. Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining me. Today, I am joined by Senator Emily Randall, who is the state senator for the 26th Legislative District, which, as far as Kitsap County is concerned, it is pretty near all of South Kitsap, reaches up into West Bremerton a little bit, and then the 35th district actually takes up part of South Kitsap, kind of west of Sydney Road. But other than that, all of South Kitsap and down into Gig Harbor Peninsula, Key Peninsula, north at the Comaneros Bridge, all that is in the 26th. So Senator Randall, thank you for joining us today.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Matt. I always appreciate the chance to talk with the South Kitsap Chamber.
You bet. Thank you. And so, we're doing things a little bit differently where we ask questions. So that way there's no, buzzer or, I'm not going to hit the mute button after 3 minutes. So got probably half a dozen questions that we'll go ahead and ask. And then there's some follow-ups and things like that. So if you're ready, we'll get rolling.
I am ready.
All right. Well, the first one, you could think of it as the easiest or the toughest question. But, it's simply tell us about yourself and why you're running for state senate.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for giving me the opportunity to reintroduce myself to the community. I grew up in South Kitsap, SK grad, class of 2004. I went to Sunny Slope and Cedar Heights, and my mom actually graduated from South Kitsap also back in 78. I'm not sure she'd like me giving that number around, but already done. This community is the one that raised me. It's the one where I learned to use my voice to advocate for neighbors, the place where I learned how our community can take care of each other in tough times. And it's a community that inspires me to serve. I was inspired by our neighbors to run in 2018 because, we had challenges then with our healthcare system, access to care, affordability of care, not just visits and copays, but pharmaceutical pricing and costs of procedures, neighbors who were choosing whether or not to go to the doctor because they weren't sure whether they could afford something else. So that inspired me to run in 2018. And I'd been working in healthcare and education organizations for about 10 years before that. And we've solved a lot of challenges. We've met our healthcare system head on. I have done a lot of work to drive down costs and increase access and protect folks who need a healthcare safety net, but we haven't solved it all. And I want to keep working. I want to make sure that all of our neighbors have it a little easier, that folks have the tools that they need to build the lives they dream of for themselves, just like, my grandparents got when they moved to Kitsap County in the 50s and 60s. This is a special place, and we want to make sure it stays that way.
Hey everybody, it's Timber Matt. I am meeting with Jesse Young. Jesse Young is the candidate running for the 26th Legislative District Senate position. Jesse, thank you for joining me today. It's a pleasure to meet with you as always.
Good to be with you. Thanks, Matt.
You bet. Hey, and so I just got a few questions. We're just going to go through these questions, and when all is said and done, I'm going to splice those together with Emily's answers, and we'll have kind of a combo interview for you guys. And so I guess without further ado, I'll start off with the easiest question. And quite frankly, Jesse, that's tell us about yourself and why you're running for the state Senate.
Well, as your current representative for almost a decade now, I've seen that there are clear differences between Senator Randall and myself. And I'm running because those differences, I believe, and I believe most of the people in this district believe, make the future less bright for our children, if not dangerous for them. The most stark difference between my opponent and me over these last 4 years has been her insistence that our nation is fundamentally, foundationally either evil or corrupt. The notion that our policing forces are inherently racist, systemically racist, has led to policy that has made our community less safe. My kids, my spouse have been accosted within the last year. Crime has risen dramatically. Police pursuits are up over 800%. And that's interesting because police aren't allowed to pursue. So really what that means is that criminals are able to flee without any repercussion whatsoever from police by over 800%. People are just driving away. Those are criminals that have committed some crime that are driving away. Car theft in Port Orchard is up 400% year over year. We've had major instances of life being lost, murders happening in our community. A spouse shouldn't have to be scared when their loved one goes to the store just to buy some groceries. And a parent shouldn't have to be scared when they send their kids off to school in the morning for their kids' safety. That reason alone was enough for me to take what would ideally be or ordinarily be a very easy re-election for myself and choose to step out of my House representative seat and then run against Senator Randall. And that's just with public safety. If you want to talk about the future of our kids, you want to talk about the ability for job growth in sectors that matter, in sectors that will give longevity and career opportunities for our kids to have a better future than what we had. Those are things that are also at jeopardy right now. And I've sought to step out of the private sector 10 years ago to lend my skill set, my career experience as a global technology consultant, as a software engineer that has worked in these industries that we'd ideally like to see our kids have a future in, and make sure that those opportunities are available for our next generation. So that's why I'm running, because I want a future for our kids. I want them to be safe. And I see major differences, especially around the areas of public safety and job growth and economic growth between myself and the senator.
The first question I have is, it's kind of a big question. It's an important question to the business world. And one of the biggest challenges facing business owners today is the rising costs of doing business. Right now we have fuel prices are increasing. We've got inflation that's increasing the cost of doing business. We've got rising labor costs, supply chain backlogs, regulations, property taxes, all taxes, employment taxes, B&O taxes, payroll taxes. All these things are contributing to the increase of costs of doing business. What role do you think the government should play in helping small businesses keep their costs down?
Well, the first thing would be to do no harm. That's ideally should be the goal of any local governance up through state government, should be to foster the business environment so that again, people that are looking to make a way for themselves and pursue the American dream actually have an opportunity to go do that. And to the degree that we've seen taxes go up, certainly now with inflation going up, and also regulatory measures go up, we're seeing the hurdle for trying to start your own business, create a successful opportunity for yourself or your family is going up. And that's just from people that are looking to employ themselves or start a business. You're also seeing a depressing factor on the economy, because as job providers are having a harder go at it, we're seeing fewer and fewer jobs and fewer high paying jobs and opportunities in our local region. And so from that standpoint, I've always been a very fiscally conservative representative. That's one of the reasons why I continue to be elected out here. I believe that we should make it easier for small businesses to start up and actually live out that paradigm. How do you do that? Well, you decrease government spending and you increase output. I have successfully written no new tax and balanced budgets since I've been in office. My opponent, Senator Randall, has raised your taxes 68 times in her first term alone. 68 times in 4 years. That's a record. That is a lot of additional tax burden. And as a matter of fact, when I started office just 10 years ago, or roughly 10 years ago, our budget was half what it is now. That means in just 10 years, the majority party has doubled the amount of taxes that they are now spending, from about 34 billion to 68 billion dollars. That's why businesses are struggling. That's why jobs, and especially the IT jobs of the future, have stopped coming to our state. We live in an area with the ancillary businesses and the peripheral environment that is available to us here in the 26th district because of the Puget Sound Naval Shipyard, an intersection of blue collar and technology arena jobs. The fact that we don't see staggering growth is a sign that they've got their tax policy wrong. It's just a marker to the fact that we are in such a blessed area that we haven't seen a greater dilapidation of opportunity for people. We need to lower taxes, number one, and we need to lower the regulatory environment, number two. And if we do that, we will create a greater economic opportunity to rise up out of this inflation and actually give greater options to people.
All right, thank you. So as a follow-up to that, in keeping costs down, what specifically would you support to help businesses keep their costs down? And can you address the enormous budget surplus that Washington State has experienced of late, and tax relief? Would you support any tax relief for the local businesses?
Yeah, the first part of that question, the very first thing that I would do is stop the impending 50 cents a gallon gas tax that my opponent voted to put in place. And it's getting very, very ominous for the tax policy in the state when, for example, the Democrat Party and my senator are getting very anti-transparent in the way that they do tax policy. So you didn't know, or unless you're reading in your political hack, you don't know that they voted a year and a half ago to raise your taxes, your gas taxes, 50 cents 4 months or 3 months after the next election. They know that they can't get away, and they're getting slaughtered in the elections when they continue to raise your taxes. And right now, with inflation going up and the cost of gas continuing to rise, they added a 50 cent per gallon tax on your fuel. It's under their CCA plan, their climate plan for quote unquote lowering carbon, even though they haven't produced any carbon reductions at all. But what they did was last year in 2021, they voted to raise your gas tax in Q1 of 2023. That way, then what do? They come back, and in this year they pass a budget that raises their spending, the government spending, and then they bond off of the future revenue for a tax increase that will happen after they hope you've not realized that they just voted to raise your tax. This is getting duplicitous with the way that they do their tax policy. So I will immediately move to repeal that impending tax increase because our economy cannot absorb it. And if you continue to raise transportation costs, the price of everything from food, not only to just transportation costs, but food and everything you see on the market will go up because of the transportation costs involved with getting product to market. So that will be the first thing that I do. In terms of our budget surpluses, well, that goes back to when we actually had some fiscal sanity. Back in 2012, 13, 14, up to about 16, we had, or the Republicans had, a coalition majority in the Senate. And as a result of that coalition majority, where some moderate Democrats came in with the Republicans to take over the Senate, we pushed back against all of the tax increases that Governor Inslee and the Democrat Party was pushing for. And we passed balanced budgets up until the point that we lost that majority. And the downstream effect of passing those balanced budgets and reducing regulation and giving some tax benefits back, lowering property taxes, for example, which we did back in 17, those types, and also reducing the cost of education. When we did those things, the economy rebounded with giving us extra revenue. So we lowered taxes, the economy grew, and the state actually had greater revenues. And unfortunately, instead of following that example, that fiscal responsibility provided greater revenues for the state, the majority party, with their newly minted majority, sought to not only spend the additional revenue, but then raise your taxes on top of it. And that's happened each year over the past 4 years. More revenues come in and they still raise the taxes. More revenues come in, they still raise your taxes. A lot of that got lost with COVID because everybody's attention was on COVID. But make no mistake, Governor Inslee, especially with his emergency powers, continued to spend all the additional revenue and then raise our taxes again. We must stop that. We've clearly shown that we can reduce taxes and the tax burden on people and still have more money coming into the state. That's a virtuous circle that rises to success. And that's the type of policies that I want to enact as your state senator.
All right, thank you. All right, so the first real question for you is one of the biggest challenges facing business owners is the rising costs of doing business, just the cost of it. That can include fuel prices, inflation, rising labor costs, supply chain backlogs, regulations, taxes, employment taxes, B&O taxes, payroll taxes, every kind of tax imaginable. So it's kind of a two-part question here, but the first part is, what role does government play in helping small businesses, local businesses, keep their costs down?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that is very squarely in our state government's purview to make sure that our business community, the backbone of our economy, these small local businesses can thrive. I chair the Higher Education and Workforce Development Committee. So I think a lot about how are we training, high school grads in Washington and also retraining adults who need to go back to school to fill the jobs of today and tomorrow in our local businesses. I talked to a lot of members of the Association of Washington Businesses. Folks come and bring their challenges with hiring, and that's why I'm so excited to get to make sure that our grads have access to, a renovated Westtown Technical Skill Center, that Washington graduates know about, career and technical education and the certifications that might allow them to get right into the workforce sooner than a 4-year degree, but that would also allow them to come back and not start from the beginning if they wanted to. But it's also about costs, like you mentioned, about ensuring that businesses can afford to keep their doors open, can afford to keep hiring and bringing jobs to our communities, and also the services that folks depend on, and that business owners can support their own families. That's why I was so excited to co-sponsor legislation this year to increase the B&O exemption level for some of our smallest business owners. So many businesses in Washington who have 1 or 2 employees are not going to have to pay B&O taxes anymore after this new law was signed. So that's some really exciting work. I also work on bringing a friendlier local business environment. I had a bill this year to change the manufacturing warehouse tax exemption process, tax credit process. Right now, the only warehouses and the only companies getting tax credit, beneficial tax status for warehouse construction are in King County, and they're only the biggest businesses. And so I introduced policy that would have allowed folks building smaller warehouses, smaller companies to take advantage of that credit, and it wouldn't be an unlimited credit that only I won't name names here, but only 1 or 2 businesses in the state would be able to qualify for, but one that more local businesses could. So they could build in the South Kitsap Industrial Park, or, the Port of Bremerton Industrial Park. The governor vetoed the portion of my bill that would have allowed for that, beneficial tax status for small local businesses. And I think their office's line was that we have enough warehouses and manufacturing facilities. And I agree to disagree. As a legislator from outside of the I-5 corridor, I know that we have opportunities here in our community, and I'm going to keep fighting for those.
All right, super. So kind of a follow-up to that line of thinking has to do with so you mentioned the manufacturing and the B&O, but are there other areas specifically that you would support in helping keep costs down? And part of this, I guess, is talking about the budget surplus that Washington State had, and any other form of tax relief efforts for local businesses.
Sure. We I think multiple reports have come out, and another one recently that shows that Washington State's tax structure is one of the most regressive in the country. And that means, low-income families, but also our small local businesses are struggling to shoulder a lot of the tax burden in the state. And there's been a tax structure work group that's been meeting for the past couple of years to sort of re-examine what solutions exist, for our state to flip that tax code right side up. I'm not on that work group, but I have participated in some of the community outreach events. They did a ton of focus groups and, community forums around the state, using Zoom to try and engage with people and get a really good sense of how our neighbors would like to see our tax code fixed. And so I think those recommendations are coming out at the end of this calendar year, in time for us to look at policy for next legislative session. What I have seen, looking at the state budget, is that if we don't take a system-wide approach, then we get sort of a tax credit here, a tax credit there, a tax credit there, and a very complicated tax system. And so, we want to make sure that we're cleaning things up systemically and making improvements for neighbors in a clearer way, so that folks can actually navigate and find those tax exemptions. I'll also just add really quickly, and we might talk about this later, that we passed the biggest, most transformative transportation infrastructure package that the state has seen this year. And knowing about the challenges facing families and businesses, we did it without raising the gas tax. Typically, all transportation packages have been funded by a nickel, dime, whatever, a fuel tax increase. And this wasn't the year to do that, but that didn't mean we didn't need those transportation investments. So I'm happy that we're able to do that.
What do you see as major issues facing Washington State in the next couple of years?
Yeah. Well, I think affordability continues to be an issue, and looking at ways that we can lower costs for families, whether that's housing, healthcare, prescription drug prices, tolls. I passed a bill that in just 1 week is going to lower tolls on the Tacoma Narrows Bridge by 75 cents, because, those commuting costs just add up. And when folks are living paycheck to paycheck and trying to balance one cost versus the other, we need to look at every single place that we can control those costs for families and small businesses. I also think our healthcare system is not fixed yet. I mentioned that at the beginning, that's what drove me to run in the first place. And though we have made a lot of progress, we still have particularly a mental health and substance use disorder system that doesn't communicate and work well together, where folks are not getting their needs met. And I think this is really tied to community safety. I've been on a handful of ride-alongs with the Kitsap County Sheriff, with Port Orchard Police, with Gig Harbor Police. And what we know is that it's really a small percentage of folks who are perpetrating a large percentage of the crime in our communities. And a lot of people are struggling with co-occurring issues, mental health and substance use disorder, and need treatment. And you know, I think when the Supreme Court changed the drug laws in Washington State, the Band-Aid solution that we had time to pass in the middle of a legislative session isn't the right long-term strategy. And so we're going back to look at how do we have drug laws that keep our communities safe, that incentivize treatment, and how do we build the infrastructure that we need so that folks can get treatment? So it's not you're referred to treatment, but there's a 4-week wait. You know, folks aren't going to go if they got to wait 4 weeks. Often folks won't go if they have to wait 2 more days. You know, you have to catch people when they need treatment. And we have to have beds and facilities accessible in our communities so that, you know, folks don't have to leave their network of support, their family, to go to the bed that's available in Yakima, right? When we should have more availability close to home. So I think, you know, mental health and substance use disorder, keeping our communities safe, lowering costs, and, you know, we are in a moment like no other around reproductive freedom and our rights to choose, you know, the when and how to plan our own families. And, you know, Washington has been a safe place to make those decisions. Voters approved the right to abortion at the ballot box even before Roe v. Wade was the law. But this is a time where we have to stay vigilant and we have to fight to protect the gains that we have made and make sure that no one chips away at those freedoms.
All right, thank you. So let's shift gears here a little bit, because I still want to talk about, you know, what are some of the major issues that you see facing Washington State in the next couple of years?
The first and foremost issue is going to be how do we deal with inflation? And the second thing is how are we going to fund our police and first responders? The Democrats have absolutely gutted the spending for our first responders. And if we don't address safety, the cost of doing business in the state is going to go up. You'll see more businesses close, which is only going to then come back and affect inflation. Now, how does that all tie together? Well, it's real simple. First off, my opponent will say that she's actually added funding to policing. That's garbage. The fact of the matter is they have defunded the police in every budget for the past 3 years. Every budget has not provided all of the funding that it would take to employ the right number or right numbers of first responding officers. For example, if you doubled the budget in both Pierce and Kitsap County, if we at the state level doubled the budget that was available for our county sheriffs and just allowed that doubling of the budget to go towards hiring new deputies, if they did that, we would still be understaffed per ratio at the national level. So we are, even if you double them, so we're less than half of what the ratio currently is to provide for public safety. That's how underfunded we are. And what they do is they'll take some of this money that they're spending and they'll put it towards caveated degrees. Well, yeah, we increased spending over here, or we gave the cops a little bit extra money so that they could go hire 1 or 2 more counselors. But you're doing nothing to deal with the deputy shortage whatsoever. That has to be addressed, because the free market cannot work when you have just rampant crime like this. And what's going to happen when vigilantism starts up? My brother was almost shot 2 months ago coming out of his place of employment because he came out and someone was ripping off his, literally in the act of stealing his catalytic converter. And he went to approach the person and someone from across the street comes out with some type of weapon and threatens my brother. He has to retreat back into the place of business. Those guys have all combined together now to protect their own cars. What's going to happen when local businesses, at some point, the chamber is going to be dealing with additional insurance policies? What can they do to protect businesses from their own employees potentially taking the law into their own hands to protect themselves? And what's that going to do for downstream business impacts? I would be willing to bet that my senator and my opponent in this race couldn't even venture a guess as to how insurance rates are going to go up if we don't address crime in this district and what that's going to do to inflation, let alone being able to articulate any form of competent tax policy wherein we should expect more value for the dollar that you are taxed as a business owner or as an individual in this state, and expect some greater return for a lower tax on dollar. You know, it's interesting to me as an IT professional, the number one justification for an IT investment in any company is to reduce costs. Yet over the last 10 years, I've watched the state dump billions of dollars into IT investments, yet they only keep spending more. That needs to be addressed. And so to the degree that we address that, we can then see a real impact on rising inflation, because government won't have to be continuing to take more of your money and then dumping it back into the economy in inefficient ways that only drive up the cost. All the welfare that we're seeing with no requirements to work, that needs to be addressed. If we actually have fiscal responsibility being practiced at the legislature, we can address inflation. And if we start spending our money appropriately on public safety, which is where I'll do it, then you can see a doubling effect in terms of making the business climate better for everyone.
All right, thank you. So you alluded to energy and climate here a little bit ago.
Yep.
This next question is how is Washington State setting itself up for success when it comes to the increasing energy costs and the shift away from fossil fuels? The demand for electricity is going to increase rapidly. Washington State supports the removal of the dams on the Snake River. How will Washington compensate for the loss of this power, of the power supply, while also demanding an increase in electricity dependence?
You know, I've served on the IT and energy committees in my time in the legislature, and I can tell you not all of Washington State supports getting rid of those dams. That would be a colossal mistake if we did that, number one. Number two, it would not only be a colossal mistake with how do we solve the problem of enough energy, it would be devastating to our low income and fixed income community members out there and families. If you start raising the cost of energy, the Peninsula Light is one of the energy providers in the 26th district. They have a new report out that the cost of energy to their downstream customer would increase 66% if you took out those dams. And if you start raising the energy costs, especially to heat your home in the winter, or cool it in the summer, if you start adding that burden onto already struggling and maxed out fixed income families, fixed income seniors, let's say, or struggling single parent families, if you start adding that to the cost of just trying to stay afloat, you're going to see a massive detriment to our state in terms of how do we protect those that are vulnerable. That must be stood up to, number one. Number two, from a standpoint of how do we address the energy scenario where people want to go green? Look, you do it the way that I did it, bipartisanly. The fact is, the number one carbon reducing energy policy in the state of Washington's history, which happens to be in the last decade, the most successfully implemented carbon reduction strategy passed along the West Coast that even Governor Inslee used, Beto O'Rourke used, two Democrats that ran for governor or ran for president in 2020. Those they underpinned their environmental strategy off of a bill that I passed with Democrat Senator or Representative Peterson. We did what we did was we created the PLIA bill, the Puget Sound, or the Pollution Liability Insurance Agency, which oversees the Puget Sound region, and has now since been expanded to the entire state of Washington. And what did it do? It protected our groundwater. It produced investments to make sure that we could get underground storage tanks replaced with favorable financing, and at the same time build out our electrical vehicle charging stations without raising your taxes. It was a bipartisan effort that I led on a number of years ago. We've only expanded it, and it goes to show that you can use good economic factors to encourage market growth in the areas that you want without raising taxes on people, without creating a bigger bureaucracy. That's why that model underpinned a lot of the Democrat platform when they were seeking to provide some formulation of an energy policy at the national level. That's why Governor Inslee used it. It underpinned his entire economic policy. And that's why Beto O'Rourke took it on when he started running for president. those are real solutions. Those are the continued types of solutions where we actually partner with the private sector instead of trying to force them with the stick mentality. Let's give some carrots out there to help partner with the private sector to find ways to get an environmentally friendly solution that doesn't close businesses and hurt fixed income or low income people at the same time. I've already got a track record of doing it. I will continue to do it. Most people don't realize that as a very strong fiscal conservative, I statistically have the most bipartisan voting record in Olympia. You can fact check that at WashingtonVotes.org, which is an independent observer and recorder of election or of legislative votes in the state. Again, WashingtonVotes.org. Go check it out. There's a button on there that you can select the legislator. You can select the years or the period of time that you want to check. And then there's a button on there that you can select to say, how many times does this legislator vote against the majority of their own party? You'll see that I have statistically the highest ratio of siding with the other side, whereas my opponent is virtually a 99% party line vote, which of course we see the policies coming out of the Seattle dominated legislature in the state. And so I'm proud of my record on environment, and it shows you that we can do it without hurting businesses at the same time. Finally, if we did cut those dams out, we'd have to go to the open market. Our wind and solar is not robust enough in the state, and they do not serve as substantial or quality baseline or base load levels of energy. So we have to go on the open market. If you actually, and believe it or not, that hydro is clean. It doesn't produce carbon into the atmosphere. You'd actually have to go. So if you cut the dams, you'd actually have to go onto the private market, increase energy costs, which would be passed on to consumers. And that energy mix that you'd buy on the market is carbon dense. So you'd actually be increasing carbon output by closing those dams just to make up the difference. It's bad policy all the way around.
How do you feel Washington State is setting itself up for success when it comes to increasing energy costs and the shift away from fossil fuels? The demand for electricity is going to increase. Washington State supports the removal of dams on the Snake River. So how will Washington compensate for the loss of that power while also demanding an increase in electricity availability?
When you say, Matt, that Washington State supports the removal of dams on the Snake River, I think that you might mean the governor.
Yeah, the governor and I know Senator Murray. Yeah. They've backed off a little bit of that, and they recognize it just might not be financially feasible. But I mean, those are big things that they would like to see done, and if we did that, we'd be in trouble.
Yeah. So I think, first and foremost, I want to say that I hear from neighbors all the time that we need to work to combat the climate crisis. We've seen fire seasons like never before over these last few years. We've seen rising temperatures and also more severe winter storms, more snow year after year than, I experienced growing up in this community. We're seeing changes in our climate. Weather events are more severe than they have been in the past, certainly in recent memory. And especially young people in this community are organized and want to make sure that they have a world to live in and that their kids and grandkids have a world to live in. So, that's certainly always on my mind, but also on my mind are costs and the reality for families, right? The average income in our community is not high. We cannot all afford to buy a Tesla or electric car. I drive a 97 Ford Ranger. It makes me feel a little guilty sometimes that, when I'm commuting long distances in it, I know it's not great for the environment, but it's a car that I could afford when I got it. And that's true for so many of us, right? Sure, we'd like to make the decisions that are the cleanest and greenest. We'd like to have solar panels, we'd like to, have a smaller carbon footprint, but we also have to live in the economic reality that we're in. So, I think it's our job at the state level to look at big system-wide changes. How do we lower carbon emissions at the state level. Some of that's converting state fleets and helping convert county and city fleets to lower zero emission vehicles. How do we decarbonize our ferries, so that they're not idling and having a big carbon impact, while they're loading and unloading at docks? How do we make some of these bigger changes and incentivize big business to also do that? We have Washington has a cap and invest strategy that is designed to incentivize large businesses, to make thoughtful decisions about their carbon footprint, and do it in a way that fits into, our capitalist market, right? How do you either do it or you trade with somebody else, or you pay a fee if you're not able to do it. I think we're definitely leading a lot of the country in this work. And it's hard to be out front, certainly. There's a lot of criticism and of change. But when I look at environmental policy, my lens is always, is this the right choice for us, for our communities? And is it a choice that helps ensure that my grandkids have, a place to live? So it's a balance. It's certainly a balance. And I won't say it's easy, but it's important work that we face head on.
Has to do with spending. Should Washington State be more concerned about controlling its spending and relying less on tax increases to pay for, government? And specifically, what can state government do to better control its spending?
Yeah. We have Washington has a really healthy, balanced budget. I mean, obviously we can't print money, but our 4-year outlook is healthy. We have good reserves. We've got a AAA bond rating, which I didn't really know much about until I started rooming with the Ways and Means chair in Olympia. But it's important work to make sure that our budget is responsible, that it has bipartisan support, that it's one that meets the needs of our community. And I think that we do a really good job. We do a great job, and we've been, recognized by, some of our creditors and, other states, and I don't know, lists of, strongest budgets in the country. But I think that we always have the responsibility to see if we can improve. Can we do better? Can we, make wiser choices with the people's money, which is what it is, right? It's your and my money. It's our money. It's not, the state with the capital S's money. And I think it's important to look at our budget as a moral document too. How are we meeting the needs of our community? Both, are we spending, the right amount, and are people's lives improving with this budget? So, two things I'll say kind of on both sides of that coin. One, this last biennium, we passed a bill that allows, it reestablishes this process where employees at state agencies can recommend efficiencies and, that cost-cutting measures, so that, everybody gets a voice in the cost-saving process. And when I worked in the private sector, we had that too, where when it was budget season, we, had staff meetings and we said, where do you think we can cut costs? Where do you think we can cut costs? And it made our budget healthier because it's folks on the front lines that often know, where we're overspending, where there are inefficiencies. I'll also say that I don't think we're meeting everyone's needs right now. There are, disability rights is really near and dear to me. I had a sister with complex disabilities when I was a little girl, who had a case manager and qualified for Medicaid waiver services. My mom is a special ed paraeducator at South Kitsap High School and on the board of Holly Ridge. And I know from hundreds of conversations with neighbors, parents of adult children with disabilities, parents of kids in schools with IEPs, adults with disabilities themselves, that we're not meeting the needs of, our neighbors with disabilities. There are 13,000 people on a basically a wait list. It's called the no paid services caseload because they haven't yet qualified for services. and the money has run out. And, you know, a lot of folks who, we just changed a law to allow people to both get employment support and community engagement support. Before this law passed, people with disabilities had to choose, do I want to work or do I want to be able to go to the movies? You know, if they needed support to do either of those things. And that's not an equitable system. That's not a system where all our neighbors are thriving. And so, you know, I think we need to look at where we can manage our money better, but we also need to look at those unmet needs and make sure we're doing everything we can to meet them.
All right, thank you. So moving back into the fiscal side of things, should Washington State be more concerned about controlling its spending and relying less on tax increases to pay for government? And also, you know, what can government do to better control its spending?
Well, the easy answer is absolutely. Look, it took us, you know, over 100+ years as a state to get to about $30+ billion in spending. And within the time frame that Governor Inslee has served, he's doubled that. In the time that I've been in office, they've effectively doubled the amount of spending. That is an insane amount of additional spending. We've been pumping billions and billions of dollars into, let's say, low-income housing, yet the problem's gotten worse. There should be some form of transparency and measurability with regard to the outcomes from the money that we give or spend. And the majority party refuses to put any of those types of metrics on it. In the private sector, you can't get away with that. If you buy a product from somebody, you expect that product to deliver what it was promised to deliver. And if they don't deliver, you stop buying that product. If you're paying for a service and somebody is not providing that service to the result that you want, which you measure accordingly for, then you stop buying that service from that person and you find somebody else out. And in this state, the governor refuses to do that. They continue to pump money into the same builders, into the same people that are getting rich while they're not solving the problem. For example, here's a measurable. How about we put a measurable that says the price for low-income housing cannot exceed more than, let's say, just for a little bit of a variance, maybe 120% of what the cost per square foot to build a normal house in the state of Washington is. Right now, well, at least the last time we looked at the numbers, the comparison that we cited on the floor of the House for our Democrat colleagues was that the average cost was about $130 a square foot. I know it's a little bit more now, but with inflation, but pre the inflation spike, about $130 a square foot to build a nice house. We're getting charged for all the money for homelessness. We're getting charged over $600 a square foot. There should be some transparency and some measurability around that. That's absurd. It's wasting our taxpayer dollars, and it's only exacerbating the homelessness crisis because we can't get as many units out at that price. We need that type of metric and some level of accounting and audit review of the state. That's just not happening. Our auditor clearly is not doing the job that the auditor should be doing. And there's no measurability. As a legislature, we should be putting measurable requirements and what are called provisos on the money that we're spending, and require that those provisos and the results of those provisos that would demand measurability come back. And if the metrics that we put out there are not hit, then the funding ceases until we find a vendor that can provide that. That's how you start to reduce the costs in the state. And all of a sudden we could start giving the savings back in terms of taxpayer relief, which is what I would advocate for.
All right, well, you dovetailed into that next question, into this next question well, and it has to do with an issue that's not necessarily directly related to business, but it does play an important role in business and an important role in the community, and that is homelessness and affordable housing. What role, could the state play in addressing homelessness and affordable housing?
Well, I would say too, there's two sides of the coin there. There's what we're spending on it, and can we spend it better, more efficiently? And then there's the other side of what can we do to affect the economic levers that impact this issue. And from the side that deals with affecting those issues, we need to have carve-outs in the GMA. I've always advocated for, and the papers, even some of the liberal papers, have lauded my call and push for regional flexibility at the county level for opt-outs to the GMA, the Growth Management Act. If we do that, then what we can see is the county, Kitsap County, is being dominated by policies that are being enforced upon them from a non-elected board of people out of Seattle that effectively are dictating an urban growth model for a very rural county. And when you duplicate that amongst all 49 counties in this, or 39 counties in the state, when you see that duplicated, what you see is a depressing of supply. We're not able to get out and build the supply that we need for all the growth and people that are moving up here. And as a result, as of the supply dwindling, this is clearly an economics 101 type of scenario. With decreased supply, prices are going up, and that's affecting the ability for fixed income families to hold on to homes, low income families or new families that are just starting out that don't have a lot of savings to even get into a home. And as a result, those economic factors are working against us when we could, through regulatory change, impact that dramatically. I would look to, if I went to the other side of the equation, like I just discussed in the previous answer, I would put metrics on that spending. You know, it's funny that I brought this up in a bipartisan way privately to Senator Randall a number of years ago. And I said, when she was coming in, I said, Senator Randall, look, because you say that you want to address homelessness. Well, go look at how much money these builders are getting out of Seattle. Go look at all these preferred providers that the state is giving millions and millions of dollars to. Why we don't want those guys to get rich? Sure, we want them to make some money, but they shouldn't be charging us over 600% more than what the cost per square foot of a low-income house should be. And she's like, oh yeah, I'm going to look into that. And then nothing. You never hear anything. At the same time, you hear her say that she takes no corporate money, yet she's taken hundreds of thousands of dollars through her caucus from kickbacks that those builders are giving to the Democrat caucus. All of that's available, publicly available at the Public Disclosure Commission. And you can see how the money moves. It takes a little bit of time to go look for it, but it's all there. And all of a sudden she's dead quiet on it. We should put metrics on the deliverability and spending of that money. And if they don't get their costs down and start providing the solutions we're asking for, I would turn around and give that money back in tax incentives, while at the same time putting a regulatory reform in place that allows regional carve-outs so that the builders over here could go build low-income housing, and we could give them tax incentives to go build it quickly. We can solve that problem from both sides of the equation. And that's a real solution that I will be pushing for as your state senator.
This is kind of a complex question, and while it doesn't necessarily it's not specifically directed as a business related issue, it does affect businesses and the community, and that's around homelessness and affordable housing.
Yeah.
You know, what role could the state play in addressing homelessness and affordable housing here in the state?
Yeah, I think the state has a big role to play in addressing homelessness and affordable housing, but I don't think we can do it alone. It has to be in partnership with cities and county governments, business owners, and neighbors. We have to do it in collaboration. Otherwise, you know, we might end up with a system that doesn't work for all of us everywhere, a one size fits all solution. One of the frustrating things that I experienced as a first term legislator was how long it takes from, a decision to be made or funding to be established to like it getting to the hands of the people that we're trying to make changes for. And, one of those experiences was my first year in Olympia. We voted on a capital budget that allocated money towards Pendleton Place. It's a permanent supportive housing facility on Kitsap Way. But this spring, the doors finally opened. It's a 72 units, includes, a collaboration between the state, county, city, but also Kitsap Mental Health, Bremerton Housing Authority, Peninsula Community Health Services. And, folks went into, homeless encampments, talked to people, found individuals for whom this facility would be really helpful. Folks who are chronically homeless, in and out of shelters, in and out of the ER, in and out of jail, but needed wraparound support. And, now the facility is full. There was a ribbon cutting this spring, but folks are living there and getting the support that they need. But that's one building, right? That's one facility. And we need more. We do. We need to spend money on helping to build more permanent supportive housing facilities, but we also need lots of different stages of affordable housing, right? That's not, Pendleton Place isn't the solution for everyone. You know, there are tiny home villages that are working really well for homeless vets, you know, in Ording and Quixote Village, where there, Habitat for Humanity does really good work with self-help housing, you know, where the land costs are lowered because a nonprofit owns them, but individuals own the homes on top. And so I think we're looking at more solutions that incorporate that kind of land bank or land trust model. Like, how do we lower costs for first-time home buyers so that people can afford, you know, a house and also afford, you know, not get priced out by property taxes. We also need more affordable rental units. And that continues to be a challenge. You know, folks who can't afford to stay in their homes. I talk to neighbors in apartment complexes all over the district, and over, I hear people who are getting a rent increase that's $300, $400, $500 a month. You know, when your budget is tight, when you're paycheck to paycheck, how do you handle a $500 a month rental increase? So we need to look at that. I also think, and this is a challenge that we need to work out with cities and counties, we need to increase density where it makes sense. I mean, we're seeing a lot of it in Port Orchard and South Kitsap. But there are a lot of areas across the state that are just resisting density close to, you know, transportation. You know, we should be building where there's already bus services. We should be building where there's already ferry services. And I know Bremerton, mayor and the city council have a proposal around infill, around, you know, ADUs and grandmother cottages and adding density in places where folks are already, it doesn't change the character, right? To have a duplex or a grandmother unit in the backyard, but it will allow us to have more access to the housing that we need. I also think we need to work with, you know, builders to figure out what are the barriers for them to be building affordable housing units. I've talked to a lot of folks who, you know, the regulations are driving up costs. And I'm always eager to look at how do we meet in the middle? How do we lower costs and also, you know, make smart decisions about, you know, the long-term future and vision and safety and the environment, all the things, you know, that we're regulating. But can we do it in a way that ensures that we are building places to live for people because we need them?
Why do you think, or why should voters in Kitsap County vote for you
Mhm.
to continue to be their state senator in the 26th legislative district? Tough question.
It is a tough one. So, you know, Matt, I'm not sure if I told you this before, but I grew up in a house with a parent of both political parties. My dad is a Republican, worked at the shipyard, you know, had more conservative views than my mom. And we were able to have really reasonable conversations with each other around the dinner table. You know, in college, I was a member of the campus Republican Club for at least a year. Yeah, I and was interested in, you know, some of my dad's ideas. I was interested in some of my mom's ideas. I was interested in all the ideas. And I think that's the kind of legislator that our community wants, someone who's going to work with anybody they need to work with to get the solutions that are going to serve our community. I talk to neighbors at the door all the time who say they don't have a party. They don't care about politics. In fact, the like partisan system kind of makes them sick. They don't watch the news anymore. It's toxic. And that resonates with me. You know, federal politics especially are so toxic. My job is to go to Olympia, to collaborate with my colleagues, to understand how policy impacts, you know, our neighbors differently than neighbors in Eastern Washington, the neighbors in Seattle, the neighbors in Spokane. How do we find solutions that, you know, serve everyone the best? How do we work together to figure out what we don't know? You know, there's a lot of things I don't know. And it's my job to seek out colleagues who can help educate me, and neighbors and, you know, experts in the field. I'm a collaborative lawmaker. I'm a solutions-driven person. I just want to make sure that our community is a better place to live for all of us. And that's, I think, what a lot of our neighbors want too. And so as long as the people of the 26th district will have me, I'll keep working hard for you, working with anybody I need to make sure your lives are a little bit easier.
This is sometimes the easiest question, so I'll save it for the end here. Why should voters in Kitsap County, in the 26th legislative district, so Pierce County and Kitsap County here, support you as the next state senator for the 26th district?
Because I'll keep your family safe. I have a proven track record of delivering on my promises. Every answer I've given to you today, whether people think it's sided one way or the other on a party line position, has been transparent, it has been measurable, and it has been direct. I've dodged no questions. And as the chamber knows, over these last 10 years, I've been very direct. I'm one of the most candid legislators in the state. I've created a strong reputation on that. I'm always available, and I bust my butt to make sure that somebody is standing up for you and standing in the gap and fighting for you. And right now, if we don't address public safety, you can forget about the business climate in this state. Somebody has to be willing to stand up. And you know what? Over the next 2 months, I'm going to take a reputational hit. Seems like every 2 years, some opponent of mine will come up and they'll claim that either I'm evil or I'm an extremist in some way, shape, or form, because apparently I'm willing to stand for fiscal sanity and fiscal responsibility. In this case, apparently now I guess I'm an extremist and a racist because I want to stand up for our police. It's a real simple question. If they'll call me an extremist, what are they going to call you if they take me out? That's a real question people need to ask now. And I've never once thought in my entire career I'd have to ask that question. It used to be that we could disagree politely on policy. Now they're vilifying people that don't agree with their leftist progressive agenda coming out of Seattle. Well, if they'll vilify those that are standing up for you, what are they going to do if that person's no longer there to stand up for you? They're going to start moving on to the next target. And that next target is going, and of course, as a chamber and as business owners, you're already seeing that. They're already starting to vilify certain businesses if you don't capitulate to their woke agenda. If you don't want to pay your fair share of taxes, if you don't want to give your employees more say in how you run your business, even though you've invested your entire life's savings and all of your family have taken a risk in terms of starting that business, putting sweat equity into it. Now all of a sudden, the employees that have not taken a risk in that have more say in how you spend. Somebody has to stand up for that. And unfortunately, it seems like in today's political environment, you're going to get called names. Well, they can call me names. I will continue to stand up for you, and I will stand in the gap. And in that regard, I will keep your reputation safe. In that regard, I will keep your children safe. In that regard, I will keep your businesses safe. I will keep your community safe. That's what I'm on the ballot standing for, to keep you safe in all of those areas. And if you want somebody that will unabashedly and professionally work hard for you, I'm your guy.
All right, Jesse, thank you. Thank you for joining me today. I want to wrap things up, and I want to remind everybody that ballots are should be hitting the streets here sometime in the middle of August, or excuse me, in the middle of October, and that the election day is November 8th. That's when your ballots are due. But my recommendation would be that as soon as you get your ballots, to fill them out, send them in, make an informed decision. And it's my understanding that if you get your ballot, you fill it out and send it in, you will get less political mail throughout the campaign season. So if nothing else, you can save yourself the time and trouble of sorting through all of the political mail. So Jesse, thank you for joining me today. As always, it was a pleasure. Look forward to working with you in the future, and good luck in this race. And thank you.
It was great to be with you. Thanks very much.